Hello, Martin. Thanks for the opportunity of doing this. My name is Bob Harrison. I'm Chair of Governors of Northern College in Barnsley. I'm also Vice Chair of Governors of a secondary modern school here in Trafford. I'm on the board of the UFI Trust, which is a £57 million we've got to support innovation in vocational education training. If you want some help with that, or you people listening to this want some help, you just need to go to the UFI Trust website. I think there's a grant application round opens on the 4th of April. I'm on the board of the YMCA, which is a bit ironic because I'm neither young, Christian, and you know, I'm a feminist, a Buddhist, and old, bald, so I don't really fit with the YMCA. But the values of the organisation are about engaging those at the margins, so it feels comfortable with that. I've spent most of my life working in schools, colleges, further adult education, and I'm also the education advisor for Toshiba Information Systems Northern Europe. So I've spent most of my life with one foot in the education world and one foot in the technology world.
Bob, do you want to talk about? Well, it's been 9 months since we last spoke, I think, which is kind of like a gestation period for a lot of human activity, isn't it? I guess but yeah, a lot's happened in that 9 months, isn't it? And a lot has happened recently. Do you want to talk about some of the things that has caught your attention?
Well, I think it might be worth us just catching up on FELTAG. How about that? Shall we do that first? Catch up on FELTAG, and then we'll do a bit of a catch up on that and where I think things have got to and where I think things are going next. And then maybe explore ETAG and where things have or have not got to on ETAG and where things might be going. I think that's particularly pertinent given the government's latest announcements about forced academisation. So let's do FELTAG first. Well, you know from your work when you were working at Ealing and Hammersmith, FE had slipped further and further and further and further behind, and I think it was 2.5 years ago now that FELTAG started doing our work. So over 2 years ago since it reported, and it's really pleasing, I think, to see there is a lot of action on the ground. I mean, one of the bits of evidence for that is I've for the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years, I've been the judge of the Times Ed FE Awards. I'm one of the judges in my particular category is the innovative use of technology for teaching and learning and assessment. And I've noticed in the last couple of years a significant shift from applications. One, the number of applications for the awards has gone up, which that's helpful. But secondly, in the early days of that award, the level of the application was very much about, oh, we've piloted this technology on this course, or you know, we've been doing this with this particular program, or we've got a grant and we've given all the kids, all the students in hairdressing a tablet or everything like that. What I've noticed this year, and in fact, I think the shortlist, well, the shortlist's been announced, the awards, you can get it on the TES website, is on the 26th of, I think it's the 26th of April, is actually the announcement of the winners. It's a big dinner and everything like that. But what I've noticed, Martin, is that the applications, instead of being little bottom-up piloty innovative things, they're much more about the systematic application of technology across the institution, and that's been really rewarding. I mean, I think the other bits of evidence that I've got is JISC have finally reinvigorated the FELTAG coalition, and there was a meeting last week, a couple of weeks ago, just before Easter, around about 50 coalition members all met to Sarah Knight from JISC has been appointed to reinvigorate that because it did go through a bit of a lull. And all the evidence from most of the participants in that is that there is, you know, lots of action on the ground. I think those of us like you and me are on Twitter. The announcement of the 50 top I think you were one of them, weren't you? Did you get a mention?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, the 50 top users of social media in further education. I think that's another step forward. I mean, you know, when you and I first started working in this area, and when social media came along a few years ago, we'd have been lucky to get 5 people in FE who use on social media. So the fact that, you know, we had to choose from over 80 people and get it down to about 50, again, is another indication. So I think 3 years after FELTAG, 3 years on, I think, you know, I'm pleased with the progress. Is there more to do? Of course, there's more to do, and you know, I think the funding arrangements, the Skills Funding Agency, are you know, much more sympathetic and understanding, and have come up with some guidance now about how the funding methodology should not be used to inhibit the use of online and blended learning. I think Ofsted have started to train their inspectors to be much more empathic and understanding. I think Ofqual, they've been very supportive, given the limitations of their remit, to say there's absolutely no reason why awarding organisations and awarding bodies should not, you know, be innovative in the use of technology. There are no restrictions within the Ofqual criteria for them to use technology. So, in some respects, I think I'm increasingly confident that the principles behind FELTAG, the spirit of FELTAG, is now starting to have an impact in the sector. And just one final thing before I know you want to come back on something, is what I'm really pleased about is I was invited to join the advisory group, the BIS advisory group, to help with the guidelines for these area-based reviews. And you know what I've had to work hard to do. I've attended, you know, all the advisory group meetings. More importantly, I've challenged the guidance. I've given BIS feedback about how, and I've tried to challenge the mindset of the policymakers to make sure that, I mean, I think the very first guidelines that came out, digital technology was mentioned almost as a footnote and an afterthought, and it was almost like, oh, and by the way, in the new landscape of FE, FE providers should look at the use of digital technology for back office savings. Well, you know, that for me was not doesn't reflect the potential of digital technology. So what I'm pleased about is whilst the guidance that's gone out for the next wave of area reviews, you wouldn't say it's a blueprint for a digital FE. But what I think you would say, if you read the guidance, which is on the BIS website, is that it's challenging the current analogue perception. Now, whether the steering groups of the Wave 2 onwards area-based reviews will have that at the forefront of their minds, I don't know. That's up to the chair of the steering groups. But what I can say is I feel comfortable that I took the opportunity to make sure the spirit of FELTAG is embedded in the guidance for the area-based review. So I think, in conclusion, yeah, making steady progress. Could we do more? Yes. Could it be faster? Yes. Is it widespread enough? No. But I'll leave you with this. I think those FE providers that will not only survive the area-based reviews, but will thrive after the area-based reviews, will have a digital mindset as they approach planning for the future. And those that don't embed the spirit of FELTAG in their thinking about the future, I don't think they will survive. So, you know, could do better, could be faster, but I think what I would say is, I think FELTAG has probably done more than Vector and GIST have managed to achieve.
That's that first part is very interesting, Bob. It's just the same kind of findings that I've got in a more ad hoc way. First of all, you say about the TES submissions. being more systemic in nature rather than the kind of pioneering lone educator going out and finding something. I guess sort of those days have passed in a way. I've just wondered about, I'm not sure what you can say about it, but I was wondered about the quality and the nature of those kind of applications of technology that you're finding in, say, those submissions.
Well, I think, I mean, I've sat on lots and lots of judging panels, and you know, I've spent 15 years sitting on employment tribunals, so I think I've become fairly astute at judging, making a judgment about how good an application is, as opposed to how good things really are. You know, I mean, and it's the same with on the UFI Trust. You know, I'm on the board member, and we have to sit and approve bids for anything up to £300,000-400,000 £400,000, and you get a sense. And I'm also on the Innovate UK. I'm one of their judges, and I think you develop over time a sort of a sense of, is this just somebody who's written a good application, or is there evidence of you know, this really happening on the ground? And I think you do get a sense, and you know, it doesn't take a lot for you to, with a bit of questioning, a bit of probing, and a bit of challenging, to get a good indication as to whether this is just a good bid or it really is good stuff that's happening on the ground. In terms of quality, yeah, well, it's difficult, isn't it? I think the colleges and the providers that are embedding the spirit, and they're not going for the cheap. I mean, you remember all that nonsense about the 10%? I mean, you know, the complete misunderstanding and the red herring of the 10% in Feltec was, I mean, we did it just to grab people's attention. You know, and those idiots that just said, all right, we'll have to go around and make sure and check whether 10% of every lesson is being delivered online, just failed to understand. I think the whole issue about quality of provision, and you know, within blended and on learning is, you know, is a challenge for the future. There's no doubt about it, and that's why I'm reassured that some of the evidence that we've got back from Ofsted, for example, is that their inspectors are becoming more informed, empathic about, and being able to sense and see how technology is being used effectively for learning. But I suppose the ultimate test of quality is, does it, are more students engaged? Do they stay engaged for longer? Is the quality of learning improving? And I think those are questions for a bit further down the line, to be honest. Yeah,
the other thing, I wrote a blog about it. I think you saw it. The managed learning environment, where the systemic use of IT. You've got what I'm certainly interested in, and from what you say, you're most interested in that as well, as the pedagogy and the use of technology for learning. But there is the business, and you mentioned it there in the early reviews, the business focus on technology, which I find as the systemic, as it's become more systemic, senior managers have got more interested, but their view seems to be almost wholly, in my experience, to be about the back office, as you were saying, the back office use of.
And I think to some extent, I think this is where, you know, and I've been doing some work for JISC and trying to help them. I think to some extent, this is the mindset at JISC, you know, the early offers and everything about JISC have been about that, and I think that they've started to change their perspective on it and talk more about the effective teaching and learning. But I think one of the myths that we need to dispel immediately, which is, you know, and this is where I challenged the FE Commissioner, publicly challenged the FE Commissioner, because I think in his naivety and lack of understanding about online and blended and digital learning, there was this assumption, false assumption, that it's cheaper and it leads to economies and it leads to less teachers, which is just nonsense. It may lead to efficiencies in the long term, but not from a case of point of getting rid of teachers. It may lead to efficiencies by allowing more learners to access, hanging on to them for better and longer, for a better use of the resources. And you know how strongly I feel about this. And currently releasing some of the assets that have been trapped in land and buildings, Victorian palaces and the whole estate, if you like, the whole asset base of FE is predicated on a model of education and training which is steeped in the industrial past, predicated on mechanical engineering, shipbuilding, coal, steel, textiles. And so the process thinking behind education and training has been limiting our ability to take advantage of the digital technologies. And that's why, I spend a lot of my time going around the country, speaking at events or running workshops and talking about the need to think differently, to have this paradigm shift away from how can we ram technology into our existing processes. Well, that's the wrong way of doing it. What we should be doing is thinking, how can we improve learning using technology, and what technology do we need? Rather than saying, we've got this land, we've got these buildings, we've got these teachers on these contracts who turn up at this. Now, how do we put technology? Well, let's put a few whiteboards in. Well, that's not paradigm thinking. That's forcing, new wine into old bottles, isn't it?
Yeah, there's something I want to write at some point in the future. Couple of things on this is like on that, riffing on I can't remember the guy who wrote the book, but what got us here won't get us there.
Exactly.
Not doing the same thing that we've done for the last 30 years with technology, which has been a wonderful period when technology has grown from nothing in schools, really. I remember when we started, we used to have a link to Kent University's mainframe and wait for the punch cards to be processed and come back. But
interesting. I'd be interested in your view as well. I mean, I know you've written about VLEs and MLEs and everything like that, but it's interesting this should be nameless until after unless this goes out till after the TES awards have been made. But one of the applicants for the TES award, one of the shortlisted applicants, so they still stand a chance of winning, is one who's got rid of their Moodle and have gone completely with Google Docs, and said, why would we want to spend money on a managed learning environment or a virtual learning environment when we can use this free software that makes it accessible for our students, whether they're in college or out of college. So I think there are some enormous challenges to the way that we think about teaching and learning in FE, and I think I'm starting to see that emerging, and hopefully when you see who's won the TES FE award, you'll see there were some good exemplars of colleges and providers that are pushing the boat out on that front.
Yeah, I had a conversation about that same thing. It was on JISC technical forum, in fact, when people were talking about VLEs, MLEs. I said, who said that they've got to be a product? They don't have. They can be, mashed, mixed from different things.
Absolutely.
You don't have to have a solution and a product to buy. I find I've done lots of, well, let's just wing it, I suppose. But from what you're saying, and what I'm feeling is, we're at a kind of interesting inflection point now with technology in education in particular, because a lot of people have talked about technology hasn't had the same effect in education as it's had in other areas like retail and stuff, with the what they call labour-saving devices, the productivity gains that we've had. And that's kind of bypassed. But we're at this point now where I think those that see the systemic application of technology, the back office productivity, they're probably about 20 years late on that, I suppose. But they're seeing the advantage for technology to make these big savings. Where you're arguing, and I'm arguing, the spirit of FELTAG is, the pedagogy. It's not cheaper. And I'm just worried about this point in time where there's like AI coming in, learning analytics coming in big time. the teacher in the middle is getting squeezed or pulled out, and FELTAG plays into some of that, with the blended learning approach. A lot of people see this as a way of, well, we can have a learning analytics system that can personalize your learning, technology can get in there and make these savings. I feel very pessimistic about this, Bob. Don't know, what's your feelings about the future, actually? Where do you think education's going with technology?
I'll stick with FE first, then we can go on to schools later. I think you're right to be. I'm not sure whether pessimistic. I think you're right to be thinking about it, because there is a real danger that if we don't argue the case, and if we don't make sure that the policymakers and the funders understand the potential of technology, they see it, this is like, we'll just apply the Uber principle to FE, and that'll make everything cheaper. I mean, there are problems and complications. It's not quite as simple as applying that principle or the Amazon principle, or whichever way you want to look at it. However, I think you have to take a step back when you say why all those changes in our lives. I mean, it's funny you should say we just had our meal box delivered, which I don't know if you've got onto this yet, but where instead of us going to Tesco now, the cardboard box appears on our doorstep every 3 or 4 days with recipes and frozen food and meat and and everything like that. And I mean, we're giving it a try, and it's changing the way we live. Everything's done online, and it's delivered, and it's personalised. You still have to cook it, so I still have to make it. But in some respects, your question is, well, why hasn't the Uber, Skyscanner, Amazon food box concept hit education? And Diana Laurillard sums this up very well when she says, because if you look at the cultural things that surround education, the funding, the regulation, the Ofsted, the inspection regime, the audit regime, the leadership and governance regimes and their mindset, is because they have yet to fully understand the potential of technology to enhance and improve learning, and therefore, because they constrain and control the culture within the institution, they're the driving forces in the cultural institution. Therefore, the culture within those institutions is difficult for them to change. So, therefore, it's difficult for your teacher, or for you as a teacher, to be able to change anything within that system unless the culture starts to change. And that's one of the things I'm pleased about FELTAG. FELTAG it's not about money, it's not about buying devices, it's not about having a grant from Vector or having a framework. It was about what are the cultural inhibitors that are stopping teachers innovating in the best way possible to improve learning, to engage more learners, to hang on to the learners for longer and better, and to make sure they progress better. And therefore, by nudging those cultural inhibitors, we're hopefully creating a bit more space. However, I have to say, there's an awful lot more work to do with the governors, with leadership. I mean, there's some interesting stuff coming out of a little governors project that the Heart of Worcestershire College did, was funded by the ETF, which did some research into governors and governors' perceptions of the role of technology. And, ETF themselves are doing a lot of work on leadership, so there's a lot of stuff that needed to be done to challenge the mindset. And there are some principles that get it. There's absolutely no doubt about it. There's an awful lot of principals, chief executives, and governing bodies who simply don't get it and have this mindset that, technology will save us some stuff on back office. We can shove some stuff online, and it'll make it a lot cheaper. I'm afraid that's very time-limited, restricted thinking, and I'm not sure that's going to get you very far. But it was always about a change management process. It's not a technology issue. This is about a cultural change management process. It was always, you know, when I sat down with Matthew Hancock all those 2 or 3 years ago and we thought this through, it was something that was going to be a legacy way beyond when me and him had moved on to other things, you know.
Yeah, there's something also about the current time, this period in technology. Not only as I think the last 30 years of technology matured and kind of come to a kind of saturation point. We've got mobile, of course, which education still hasn't got its mind around. But at the moment, artificial intelligence is just on some kind of amazing exponential curve. It's
Absolutely.
just unbelievable. The thing, I mean, if education still hasn't got its mind around social networks, social media, and mobile, let alone what's going to happen with AI, except that the likes of Amazon and Google and Microsoft, I can see AI as the teacher. I mean, this is what teachers have got to compete against in the next 30, well, not even 30 years. It'd be, God knows how fast it's going to happen. But
you used an interesting word there, and I think this is, again, you use the word compete, and I think this is one of the things that we have to challenge. That it's not about competing; it's about complementing. And I think I agree with you. You know, education is struggling to get its head around mobile, let alone AI and some of the stuff, you know, that we know is coming down the line. I mean, you don't have to be Tim Berners-Lee or Bill Gates to be able to see the future, which is, you know, and you've heard me do it. I mean, at this point, I usually get the picture of my grandchildren out, don't I? And talk about when they leave school in 2027 and 2029, which I've got another 2 now, so it's now 2032. And if you think about the pace of technological change in the last 3 years in our lives, I mean, you know, we're talking about Uber now. We didn't have a Uber, did we? You know, you can remember when you were director of IT at Ealing and West Hammersmith, when you thought it was cool to walk around with your name tag with a USB stick on it. Did you never do that?
No, I didn't.
Well, lots of people did, I can assure you. Now, you think about how fast technology is changing in those few years, and to progress it forward now to when my grandkids leave school, and like you say, put in mobile, wearable, cloud-based, wireless, virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence. I don't think teachers can afford to compete with that. I think what they need to do is complement it, understand how it works, and then balance and blend the skills and the requirements that are necessary for learning, which is essentially human interaction. That we say you have to be face to face with the human interaction. You and I are interacting now on a human basis, and you're in London and I'm up here in Manchester with just to let you know, if you see me glancing over my shoulder watching the T20 finals on the television at the same time. So, you know, I think the future, you and I can see the future, and lots of other people can see the future, the where it's going. How teachers and leaders and governors and policymakers adapt to that, that's the challenge. Not to compete with it, but to say, how do we make the best use of this? And my view is, rather than technology being used just to save back office or to cut down, it can be used in a much more positive and productive way. Leads to efficiencies by all means, but the efficiencies come from greater numbers of learners studying for longer periods to higher levels of qualification with more progression and with emerging with skills which the country UK PLC needs. Now, you know, topical that we're talking about this today when the government's meeting to decide what to do about Tata Steel, isn't it? And Tata Steel, etc., etc., etc. And you know, there's absolutely no doubt about it that my grandchildren, when they leave school, they will have to have a level of digital skills which will allow them to survive in a global economy, in a very competitive global economy. So you know, I think the direction of travel is very clear. The worry is, and I suppose we're jumping into the school sector here now, we're talking about schools, we'll leave Celtag behind for a bit. The anxiety here, Martin, is at just at that very point, critical point that that's happening, we've now got the government talking about forced academisation and making every school become an academy. And the motives for that, in my mind, are very clear. That this particular government, with its DNA is against state intervention, against state control, and that's perhaps why we won't take over Tata Steel. It's about the market, it's about privatisation. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And if you follow the Twitter stream, or follow my Twitter stream, you'll see all the comments from everybody around. That the forced academisation process is predicated on a softening up of the state's education sector for ultimate privatisation. There's an interesting blog out at the moment by Andrew Bennett. It's on the Twitter stream, which analyses all the people on the boards of all the academy trusts, and the vast majority of them are venture capitalists, you know, big money people, and ironically, coincidentally, government ministers who are in charge of the academies programme, who are also in their private life own businesses that run schools. Now, you know, the direction of travel and forced academisation for me is just a Trojan horse driven right into the heart of the state sector in order to soften things up for privatisation. And my personal view is that, you know, we should oppose that at all levels, not least because it removes any local accountability, removes parents from it, but also I'm anxious that the privatisation agenda may also lead to the sort of stuff that's been happening in the States with charter schools and with virtual charter schools, which is, you know, pack them in, get them signed up, get them cheap, you know, get them on a laptop. And, you know, we've joked about this before. If you want to learn some lessons about how not to use technology in education, just Google the word Apple, Los Angeles, disaster, and Pearson. You know, giving kids a tablet preloaded with all the national curriculum content, with some test materials in, you know, and chucking without involving teachers. It's just a recipe for disaster. So I think you're absolutely right. Your analysis is right. There's a real axiomatic point which people like me and you, who I would call our technology enthusiasts, but built into some reality about pedagogy. So it's not just a case of technology also. It's to say there is a danger here that if we let the wrong people, it's like anything in life, you know, if we get the wrong people get their hands on the kit with the wrong motivation, it's going to be a bad outcome. So it's really, really important that people like you and me and others argue about the potential that technology's got in the right hands. You know, technology can help us make our lives better. It can also make nuclear bombs, can't it? So, you know, I think there's a massive moral imperative right at the heart of what you're saying.
Yeah, that's interesting. You should bring in morals there as well. Education's so complex. Everybody's got a finger in its pie, isn't it? You know, there's industry, there's politicians, there's parents, there's well, somewhere in there is the student. You know, yeah. Pulled in every single direction.
God forbid you should have student representatives on these academy trusts. That'd be, you know, that's. I mean, you know, the model is predominantly a capitalist commercial model. I mean, the suggestion that the board. You don't even have to have boards of governors. Some of the, you know, they're not called governors, they're called board members. And it's just trying to apply a commercial way of working to what I believe is, you know, the suggestion that these academy trusts are not for profit is just ludicrous. I mean, they are making profit. They don't necessarily might still say a zero on the bottom line of the accounts, but the profits are all hemorrhaging out as it tumbles down the chain of command. You know, so board directors getting paid, or their companies siphoning money off chief executives of some of these trusts, earning £300,000 a year, senior, you know, etc., etc., etc. So don't let's be kidding. These are not for profit. They are for profit in the sense of the word profit being money being made, and money being made out of public state education.
Yeah, it's a pity. Well, there's a couple of things that I've been thinking about. One, of course, is the view of student as commodity. You know, something there to be used for, you know, for profit, for monetization, and the axiomatic point that you were bringing in there, which is the word I was looking for in a way, is at this very point where we're going to the 21st century, and just like you were saying, the future is so uncertain. We do need to be flexible. We need a different set of skills in the mix, the 4C stuff, you know, the collaboration, communication, creative thinking, critical thinking, at a time when the schools may be under pressure to perform for various targets that aren't moral. They're there to meet a different criteria. I mean, it almost sounds like and you may be coming back, if we're still around in 5 years' time, to talk about the Google disaster academization.
Exactly.
I've no idea.
The McDonaldization of our education system, you know, that's what we've got to guard against. You know, those thought processes, those mindsets, those paradigms. So you're right. We've got to balance things up. You and I are not in that church that's our schools minister, the Amish Nick Gibb, who thinks, you know, all technology should be banned and we should just go back to the quill and the pen and everything like that. I mean, that's absolute, you know, nonsense. And I have to say, it's holding us back, in my view, is really restrictive. And the fact that his predecessors, Gove, Hancock and Willits, set up the Education Technology Action Group. We reported over 18 months ago now that report has sat in the DFE. You know, and just some simple record. Instead of going down the forced academization route, why don't they just agree to make sure every school and college has super fast broadband? Why don't they make sure, every, I mean, that'd raise standards straight away, because it'd mean every school and college could access all the world of knowledge that the internet provides. And then obviously they'd have to improve the skills of the teachers and stuff like that. But let's not kid ourselves. The forced academization process is nothing to do with raising standards. It's all to do with privatisation. And like I said, read that Andrew Bennett article, read Moe and Chubb, and you'll see where the origins of that are. So you're right. It is a very tricky point. We're on a very tricky point. And whilst on the one end, we're not the Nick Gibbs of the world that say banned, we don't want any technology in education. Neither, I would say, are we at the other end of the extreme, which is saying, right, let's, you know, stick every kid in front of a computer and turn on the artificial intelligence and everything, you know, on the computer and the technology and solution to everything. I think you and I have always been in the position where it's about how teachers use technology. So really, the issue is, how do we support and enable and empower and help teachers use what technology is available, not just for teaching, but for learning as well. So, you know, this is where, you know, we would come into conflict with some of the more traditionalists who think teaching is predominantly about passing on facts and knowledge to the next generation and then asking them to regurgitate it in 18 months, 2 years' time, you know, where it would bring it into the into challenge, you know, some of those more fundamentalist teachers. So I think there are threats with technology, there are opportunities with technology, and this is where it goes back to paradigms, ways of thinking, values, and the purposes of education.
Yeah, you mentioned much earlier about the social dimension. I mean, a lot of conversations I've had with people, I think you were in one on Twitter last week, or not that long ago, where someone from the industry, Dion Dion Hinchcliffe, who normally works in industry, social enterprise, as it were. He chipped in with a good point about education being a primarily social activity. It's about conversation. I mean, some of the people in the sort of Twitter conversations we have don't always agree with them, but it's about conversation, the social aspect, which is so important, which is so intangible. One thing I found very interesting, I'm not sure if you saw it, but the World Economic Forum back in January were thinking of redoing the PISA tests. I was thinking that, like the exams are the tail that wags the dog, that is your favourite.
Yeah.
By changing the examination system, you could suddenly,
well,
do attention change.
Well, it does, because what obviously drives our politicians is the PISA tables and the PISA tests, because that's what they want to be able to judge on, to say, when we were in power, we went from 24th to 17th in maths or in science or English or everything like that. Failing to understand, of course, that all the other nations, well, one, that the testing regime is changing, so it's fairly meaningless anyway. And secondly, you're not in control of everything, because other nations are doing what they need to do in order for them to rise up the tables and everything like that. But I think the PISA things is interesting. The PISA changes are interesting. They've piloted this year a new criteria about the use of technology to solve problems. So it'd be interesting to see how all that pans out. But I don't place much store about the PISA tables and whether they help. Although I do know it challenges politicians thinking. So I think where we're at, both I'm pleased about the way the FE's moved forward and the FELTAG. There's still a lot of work going on. As I say, I'm still quite busy speaking at events and cajoling and challenging and hopefully inspiring people to think differently. And the government, bids. I've managed to get my voice heard there. And with the Skills Funding Agency and with Ofqual. So I'm pleased about that. I think in terms of schools, we've got a major blockage. We've got a major ideological blockage in that we've got a schools minister, Nick Gibb, who, for some reason, whatever reason it is, whatever his motivation is very Luddite in his approach. He doesn't believe in technology. He thinks it's a distraction. His stock answer to anything about use of technology is, well, why can't you do that in a book? His view about education is it's all about textbooks and memory and regurgitation, everything like that. So until he goes, and we get a more enlightened schools minister, I'm not sure, or until his boss goes, Nicky Morgan, and we get somebody that's more enlightened who will challenge him. My fervent hope, and I'm not sure I want to say it because it might damn it, but my fervent hope is that post the EU referendum, when whichever side wins, there'll be some reshuffling. There'll be some bloodletting, there'll be some revenge, there'll be some rewarding, and my profound hope is that there'll be a reshuffle at the Department for Education, which means that the blockages that are currently there will be removed. Because to be fair to this government, if you look at the policy pushes that are coming from other government departments, for example, the DCMS, the digital strategy that's being pushed by Ed Vaizey at the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. To be fair to the Cabinet Office and Matthew Hancock and his digital strategy that they're pushing from the Cabinet Office. And I understand the Number 10 Policy Unit are now showing much more interest in the role that technology could have to improve standards and everything like that. So I'm rather hoping that the pressure on the Department for Education, plus possibly a reshuffle, that there might be an opportunity in the summer for us to revisit the findings of the ETAG report and hopefully get them back on the agenda with perhaps a more enlightened view. But by that time, we'll know a bit more about whether this academisation process is going. Because, you know, if that does happen, you're very much in the hands of the academy trusts, then, aren't you? You know, and if your academy trust believes in technology, we might end up with schools like the rocket ship schools in the United States, or you know, those charter schools that have gone very. Or we might end up with, you know, a religious unit.
I know what you mean.
Not believing in the use of, you know, the Amish charity running. You know, I mean, I'm being ridiculous, but nevertheless, I think the potential is still there. What's really scary about the academisation process is that the assets, the land and buildings that currently the schools own or the local authorities own, that you and I have paid for in our taxes and everything like that, that it's in the gift of the Secretary of State to hand them over to the academy trusts.
Just at the yeah, that's a good point, Bob. Just at the very time when, certainly around London, the cost of property, I wouldn't say it's peaked, but is at such a rate that that's a valuable asset. Just at the same time that we're saying that technology, you don't need these assets, the building assets, so much.
Absolutely.
Break down, you could use technology, and at the same time we hand over these assets
to a private company.
To a private company.
And you've got no, once they've gone out of the state sector, and there's a very, you know, there's some legal arguments last week on Twitter and everything. It's very clear, once these schools cease to exist as legal entities in the local authority and become part of a multi-academy trust, there's no way back. I mean, it's all very well Nicky Morgan talking about there is no reverse gear. There's no reverse gear in the academisation process. Once they've gone, they've gone. And you know, we're not going to get them back, which is, it's like selling off everything that my mum and dad and your mum and dad and we paid for that were part of the local community and handing it over to the private sector. You know, well, I'm sorry that, I mean, perhaps I'm just turning into Victor Meldrew, but at 65, if that's the way that education's going, I'm glad I'll be out of it.